Hello, and welcome to another installment of the Weird Chronicles. Each episode, we bring you tales of action and adventure from Malifaux and the other side. On today's show, we return to the days when the Burning Man first appeared over Malifaux, looking like a newborn star in the sky. He brought with him violence, discord, and madness. As today's story shows, even the very young were susceptible to his malign influence. I hope you enjoy Little Star.
Little Star by Michael Wallace. Adelaide was in darkness. She thought herself blind, but she could just make out the silhouette of her hands grasping at handfuls of sand under her. She realized she was in a desert of some kind, a place without a sun or moon or stars. Panic rising, she crawled forward, trying to find a source of light. Sounds washed through her ears like ocean waves. She became aware of vague shouting and screams, and the muffled coughs of distant rifles. Pressure hammered in her ears from explosions she couldn't see. "Help! Help me!" she cried, her voice distorted. She clawed at the darkness, and her hand found something smooth, wet, and cold. Trembling fingers found the edge of a nose, and still lips tacky with blood. Light blazed into existence somewhere nearby, shining down on the body of a man. Blank eyes stared up at the empty sky. Adelaide screamed, and the sound seemed to shatter the illusion of darkness and silence. She found herself surrounded by bodies, dozens, no, hundreds of them, strewn about a featureless battlefield. Dancing light drew her attention, and she turned to face it. Fires, some red, some blue, burned on the horizon, like a new sun ready to be born on the face of the world. Its approach filled her with fear she couldn't explain, and she screamed as something reached out to her from beyond the fire. Adelaide sat up in her bed, gasping for breath. Her skin was dotted with sweat as the chill of her bedroom clashed against the memory of heat. A nightmare. Adelaide shook her head, trying to banish the fear that rippled through her body. "William, She silenced herself and stared at the empty space in their bed. Her lonely bed. The reminder pushed her dream into the dark recesses of her mind. She brought herself to her feet. The nearby church rang its bell for the morning service, but she ignored it as she dressed in her sturdy work clothes. As she left her bedroom, her eyes were drawn to the closed bedroom door on the far end of the hall. "Sandra? Get up, I'll start breakfast." She didn't wait for a response, and instead went downstairs to the kitchen. Her hands hesitated over a cupboard before opening it and acknowledging its emptiness. She went to the others, wondering why she hadn't simply gathered up what they had into one place. No flour, no sugar, and no eggs. Just a tub of oats and a tin of sardines. Adelaide closed her eyes. 4 more days, she said, and repeated it as she gathered up the oats and fetched some water. She made 2 bowls, wondering if Sandra would even touch hers. But she didn't have time to wait. She ate quickly and left the house. The weather was miserable for May, even for England, and she hugged her coat close as she walked. The end-of-shift bell rang out after what seemed like an eternity. Adelaide put her tools away and tugged her work gloves off. Her fingers were cool and shaking, an ache that ran through tendon and bone. She had been born to and raised by a mother who had never anticipated Adelaide needing any sort of skills outside of cooking and cleaning. Shaping iron for the Empire's needs, rail lines, support struts, and the like, was strenuous work. She imagined she would have gotten accustomed to it, even put on more muscle, if only she could get more in her stomach than oats and water. "Good evening, Addie," Carter said, tipping his bowler hat as he walked toward his wagon. "Good eve," Adelaide replied, grasping her hands to keep them from shaking. Carter opened his mouth to say more, but she added a curt, "See you in the morning." She was tired, and tired of hearing his suggestions for coping. She made her way for home, trying to empty her mind of all troubles. Sardines for dinner did not sound particularly appetizing, but she needed something more than oatmeal. The house was dark when she arrived. She found her daughter, Sandra, sitting in front of the kitchen stove, a box of matches in one hand. As Adelaide watched, Sandra lit one and cast it into the stove, watching it burn, flicker, and die. Then she lit another. Each flicker of flame reminded Adelaide of her dream, of the eerie flame that grew on the horizon like a tidal wave. Adelaide's eyes went to the table, where the oatmeal she'd made that morning sat untouched. Those matches aren't cheap. Sandra paused mid-strike. Without looking back, she closed the box and set it back beside the stove and stood up. "Did you do anything today?" Adelaide asked, but Sandra didn't respond, and instead hurried past her into the hallway and up the stairs toward her room. "Hey, answer me!" The bedroom door shut, just loudly enough for Adelaide to know her daughter did not intend for it to open again that night. Adelaide sighed. Feeling more tired than she had all day, Adelaide took up the matchbox and winced when she realized it was more than half empty. She would have to keep the matches with her from now on. She simply couldn't afford to waste such things. Her appetite was gone, but she opened the tin of sardines anyways. She ate them all, knowing they would go to rot otherwise. 3 more days, she promised. Adelaide returned to her room, tugged off her work clothes, and climbed into bed. She curled into a ball and wept, stifling her sobs so as not to upset a daughter she wasn't sure would even notice. The next morning, she didn't bother to wake Sandra. She added water to the discarded oatmeal and stirred it enough to make it palatable. When the bowl was empty, she left for work. Carter was there with a weak smile full of unspoken concern. The iron was there, heavy and red-hot, demanding her attention and more strength than she feared she had left to offer. Lunch came and went without a scrap of food. Once she might have been too proud to ask for something to spare, and later she had been too hungry to be proud. Now she felt too tired to be hungry, and had stopped thinking about food altogether. She returned to work, always feeling the burdens on her shoulders. Husband, daughter, hunger, work. She was adrift at sea in a boat full of holes, with only a bucket named inevitability. A single tear dropped from her face and sizzled on the hot iron. Grimacing, she struck the spot with her hammer, smashing away the carbon that formed. The end of shift bell rang. She knew there was only oats and water waiting at home, but she couldn't help but long for them. 2 more days. Crowds gathered outside as she left. She weaved around them. Her thoughts were elsewhere. "What do you think it is?" someone asked. He was a heavy-set man with a thick square beard. "Dunno. Mage stuff?" said another. "I'll bet it's some guild shite." Adelaide barely heard their words. She went home, her trepidation growing with each step. She wanted to open the door and find her daughter inside, happy. Even if she was a sobbing, grief-stricken wreck, it would be an improvement over the lifeless shell Sandra had become. She wanted food in her pantry, enough to last a lifetime. She wanted... The house was dark. She went upstairs and found Sandra in her bed. It was hard to tell if she'd moved at all. Adelaide wanted to close the door and go to her room, but instead she went in and sat on the bed beside Sandra. Her daughter stared out the window, eyes half-lidded. "I'm sorry," Adelaide said. She didn't know what else to say. She wished Sandra would just look at her and see her. A flickering light drew Adelaide's attention. She looked out the window to the skies over London. There, amidst the scattering of clouds, she made out a bright pinprick of light. "Look, Sandra," Adelaide said. "Is that a star?" Strange that it was so bright, Adelaide thought. The clouds seemed to part for it, and it shimmered like no star she'd ever seen. Sandra lifted her head. Her watery eyes widened. She didn't speak, but the reaction alone warmed Adelaide's heart. "It's so pretty, isn't it?" Adelaide asked. "Do you remember the poem from when you were a child? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky." Sandra blinked, her eyes transfixed. "A falling star?" Her voice sounded almost unfamiliar to Adelaide. "Yes, a falling star, a shooting star. What do we do when we see a shooting star?" "Make a wish. Yes, make a wish, Sandra." Sandra opened her mouth. The words hung on the edge of her tongue. Then she seemed to deflate. She curled up under the blankets, but still stared up at the star. "Sandra?" Nothing. She had withdrawn again. Adelaide wiped her eyes and sat with Sandra for a few more minutes before going to bed. The star was visible from her window as well, more teal in colour than the purer white of the stars around it. She thought of making a wish of her own, but she held her tongue and went to sleep. When dawn came, Adelaide could still see the light. It had changed, almost imperceptibly, but she could make out a bright gash in the sky, rather than a pinprick. Sandra was sleeping, and from the heavy circles under her eyes, Adelaide guessed she'd been awake all night. She let her daughter rest and set out for work. The streets were cluttered with people, all watching or discussing the light. She heard several theories: a government experiment, a threat or attack by the guild, or any number of powers, even a new breach leading to Malifaux. No one seemed to agree on anything. Adelaide put it out of her mind. She had too many problems of her own. As she hammered iron and hefted beams, she thought of Sandra coming out of her shell the night before, however briefly. Perhaps she would improve. Perhaps the grieving was coming to an end, and she could be a daughter again. "My cousin says it's got something to do with them crazies that follow Ephraim Wade," someone at the ironworks said as she hammered a length of still-hot railroad track. "Who?" "Some rich cuckoo. Got picked up by the bobbies when he wouldn't stop preaching about a bright and beautiful new world or some such bollocks. Crazies leading crazies. Makes you wish you could put 'em all away." Adelaide winced, but kept her focus on her work. When the end-of-shift whistle came, she left in a hurry, wanting to find some measure of solitude in her home. When she arrived, she headed for the kitchen to make another bowl of oatmeal before going to bed. She didn't notice a light coming from the hallway until she turned to see Sandra standing in the kitchen door. "Mother?" Adelaide jumped. "Oh, heavens, Sandra! She took a breath. "You... Sandra!" Sandra almost flew into her mother's arms, and they embraced, squeezing each other tighter than was comfortable, but neither were willing to let go. "Mama!" Sandra was laughing and crying. "I saw him!" "Saw him? Who?" She was so happy to see her daughter moving and speaking again that she barely heard her daughter. "Papa," Sandra said in between giggles, "I saw him." "You... what?" "In a dream," Sandra said, almost to reassure her mother. "I fell asleep watching the star, and I made a wish, and then I dreamed about him. I saw him." Adelaide wanted to laugh, but instead, she cried. Adelaide dug into her dresser, producing a small handful of coins from her savings. She had more once, but necessity and emergency drained her savings dry. When she went downstairs, she almost broke into tears again when she found Sandra standing there, wiping wrinkles from her school dress. "Here," Adelaide said, offering the coin. "When the trolley woman comes, get a proper meal, all right?" "But, Mama—" "No buts," Adelaide said. "You've barely eaten anything for weeks. Tomorrow we'll go to the market and get proper food. But for now—" She closed Sandra's hand over the coins. "You have the note for your teacher?" "Yes, Mother," Sandra said, adopting a more formal, polite tone. "Good," Adelaide replied. The two smiled at each other. "Go and have a good day at school." "I will," Sandra promised, and the light in her eyes said she would. They left the house together and hugged before parting ways. Adelaide saw her daughter stare up at the sky, at the burning light, and smile like Adelaide had never seen. She then skipped away, singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to herself. Adelaide breathed a deep sigh of relief and set out for the ironworks. Strangely, she saw fewer people lining up to enter the building, and those who remained looked haggard or haunted, like they hadn't slept at all that night. She saw Mr. Morgan, the shift manager, leaning against a brick wall near the ironwork entrance. He had a scowl on his face, watching the employees file in. "Something the matter, sir?" Adelaide asked. Morgan grunted. "Nearly a dozen didn't show up today, and now it's nearly half. All of London is on edge." "What do you mean?" He glanced at her like she was simple. "This is what I mean." He took a folded newspaper from under his arm and thrust it into her hands. "Earthquake swallows San Francisco. Is London next?" "I don't understand," Adelaide asked. Morgan gestured up at the sky. "The Burning Man. That's what the Americans called it. Someone got a good look at it. Said it was shaped like a person. It appeared over San Francisco first, just like it did here. Then it vanished, and the whole city is gone." Adelaide felt a chill in her blood. "This can't be real, can it?" "Might as well be. Everyone's either running or hiding. They'll be looting next, mark my words. Riots. But we're not here to squawk. If you're here to work, get to it." "Line up," Morgan said shortly after the end of shift bell rang. Adelaide stilled her trembling hands by clasping her fingers together. The supervisor went down the line, holding a basket of unsealed envelopes that he passed to each worker. The envelope he handed Adelaide felt thinner than normal, or perhaps she just hoped there would be more. She tucked it under her coat and hurried home, mindful of the fiery shape in the sky. Sandra was waiting for her, and as Adelaide entered their home, the kitchen smelled of apples that set her stomach growling. "Welcome home, Mother," Sandra beamed. "I made more oatmeal, but maybe it won't be so awful with some cinnamon and apples. I bought both, as many apples as I could. Miss Flynn was so surprised to see me. Did your day go well?" Adelaide smiled. "Very well," she said. "I earned my wages, so tomorrow we should be able to enjoy a hearty meal." Sandra smiled. "That's wonderful. I knew the moment I dreamed of Papa again." Her eyes drifted. "Things are going to get better now. I know it. Here, sit." She spooned the oatmeal into a bowl. "I was just finishing my schoolwork. I have a lot to catch up on. Miss Flynn threatened to expel, but she was just talking. I think she was happy to see me." Adelaide sat down and watched Sandra set a pair of books, papers, and pencils down. It was good to taste something in the otherwise flavourless oatmeal, but her eye caught a hint of blue amidst Sandra's papers. "What's this?" she asked, tugging a piece of paper free from the pile. It had been coloured with wax crayons. "A drawing." "Oh, yes," Sandra beamed. "I haven't been able to get the dream out of my mind. I wanted to draw it. Do you like it?" Adelaide didn't answer. It depicted 3 figures. One was Sandra floating. Another was Adelaide, her expression free of exhaustion and stress. Holding both of their hands between them was a man. He looked somewhat like how she remembered William, Adelaide's husband, but it was difficult to be sure, because he was wreathed in flames. Or perhaps he was the flame. Adelaide couldn't tell which was which. Remembering the newspaper headline, Adelaide set the picture down, her brow furrowing. "Is that Father?" Sandra smiled. "Bright and beautiful." The next morning, Adelaide headed for the market. The light in the sky was brighter than ever, flickering a distressing light. Her mind reeled, concerned about her daughter's dream, the fire in the sky, and San Francisco. The market was normally busy in the mornings. She learned to take routes around it to avoid the smell of coffee and other things she normally couldn't afford, for fear of her empty stomach turning her into a thief. But the market was almost empty. A few people mulled about unenthusiastically. Most of the shops were dark, with their doors locked tight. Some were barred, windows and doors alike. She was glad to see the butcher shop was open. The customer waiting area was empty, but she heard a gramophone playing in the background. "Hello? Mr. Tompkins?" A loud thwack boomed from the back, where Mr. Tompkins did his shopping. Thwack, thwack. "Hello?" The chopping sound stopped. Someone took the gramophone needle off its wax cylinder. The sudden silence felt ominous. Adelaide shifted back toward the exit. "What do you want?" said a voice. She turned. Mr. Tompkins was a heavy-set man with stubby fingers. "Oh, Mr. Tompkins, I'm Adelaide Leeds. We spoke a few weeks ago." The butcher stared down at her. From the bags under his eyes, she assumed he hadn't slept in a few days. "Yeah, I remember you," he said. "The pig, right?" Adelaide nodded. "Yes, a shoulder." "I got it," he said. He went into the back. Before she could debate leaving, he returned with a substantial package wrapped in brown paper. "My, that must have been quite the pig," Adelaide said. Tompkins smiled. "Yeah." "I don't know if I can carry it," Adelaide said. "Could I have it delivered?" He stared for a long moment, shrugged, and set the package down on the counter. 20p, Mum, +2 for the delivery." She reached into her purse. She held the money out to him, but he only continued to blankly stare, so she put it on the counter. He grabbed her wrist in response. He pulled her in close. "New sun's rising, bright and beautiful. I see it, feel it." She realized that he held a butcher knife in his other hand. "Let go!" She slapped him, putting all the strength of her ironwork labor into the blow. It did little more than draw a toothy smile from Tompkins. He leered and drew the knife toward her face, then let go and suddenly jerked back. He looked about as if hearing sounds she couldn't. "You've seen him too," he smiled, almost apologetically. Before she could respond, a brick shattered through the window. "He has come!" screamed a voice. "The new dawn rises!" Tompkins jumped over the counter and leaped through the window, tackling whoever shouted. Beyond the grappling butcher and vandal, Adelaide saw madness on the streets, looters and raving madmen pouring through the market. Adelaide felt terror surge through her, but in the chaos, she could think of only one thing. She grabbed her money from the counter, then the pork butt, and ran out the door. When Adelaide returned home, she found Sandra waiting for her. "I thought you were going to the market," Sandra said. "I thought you were going to school," Adelaide said. "Miss Flynn sent us home," Sandra said. "Did you just buy pork?" Adelaide shook her head. "Something's wrong. People started fighting. I thought Mr. Tompkins was going to kill me." Sandra's eyes widened. "He pulled a knife," Adelaide said. "Is that why you're here? Because of the fighting in the market?" Sandra hesitated, putting her hands behind her back. "I guess so." Adelaide sighed. "Go on. I'm afraid we'll only have pork for dinner tonight. The market will have to wait until the bobbies come to deal with that mess." Sandra went into the kitchen and started drawing at the table. Adelaide prepared dinner, carefully slicing away enough pork for the two of them and setting aside the rest for later. Outside she heard distant crashes, the occasional crack of thunder or a gunshot. Adelaide prayed the sounds didn't come any closer. The sounds were interrupted only by Sandra's humming as she recited "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." Adelaide put a pot of water on the stove to start boiling the ham. The matchbox was not where she had left it. For a moment, she thought she'd kept it in her work clothes to keep Sandra from wasting them, but she had put them back the day before. She was sure of it. There was a knock at the door. Adelaide set her apron down and headed into the hall. "Who is it?" she called out. "Constable Horn, open up, please." The authoritative tone carried through the door. Who is it? Sandra asked from the table. Stay there, Adelaide quietly replied. She went to the door and opened it a crack. A policeman stood outside, dressed in dark blue with a tall hat. When she saw he wasn't an immediate threat, she opened the door. Constable, forgive me. Is this about the marketplace? I saw the riot break out and... Marketplace isn't my concern, miss, Horn said. It is miss. Mrs., actually, Adelaide said. Mrs. Leeds. Is your husband about, then? Adelaide winced. No, he serves in the King's Army. He's been deployed for some months now. He stared at her, expressionless. Then he lifted his clipboard. I'm here on behalf of the Waterdown Street School. What's wrong? Adelaide asked. She had a sudden motherly tinge of anger at the thought that Constable Horn might be acting as a truancy officer. Just doing a head count, Mum, Horn said. Is Sandra Leeds here? Yes, Adelaide said. Sandra? Sandra had vanished from the table. Adelaide heard a door slam upstairs. Well, that was her. Is she in trouble? No, as I said, just a head count, Horn said. For what reason? Horn stared at her. Did your daughter not tell you? The school's on fire. The water boys are trying to put out what's left. Just making sure all the students are all right. Adelaide felt a cold ball of lead drop into her stomach. On fire? Yes, Mum. Arson from the looks of it. Arson, Adelaide murmured, clutching her stomach. I've other families to check on, Mum. Glad to hear your Sandra is safe. Do your family a favour and stay inside until all this blows over. Horn tipped his hat and laughed, staring in the direction of the distant commotions of the marketplace. Adelaide stood in the open door a moment, frozen. She eventually shut the door and went into the kitchen. Sandra left her artwork behind. She had added colour to it. Bright red and yellow flames engulfed the Man of Light. And below them, she drew people. Men and women, their faces grimaced in pain, some of them twisted. Their bodies were contorted like hideous deformities displayed in a circus freak show. Each of them was burning, their arms cast upward toward the man on fire. Black smudges covered the drawing, and Adelaide took the picture to sniff the substance. The sulphuric note of a matchstick tickled her nose. She folded the picture and went upstairs. Sandra's room was closed, the handle locked. Open this door, Sandra. It slowly opened. Sandra's eyes were wide and fearful. Is he going to take me away? Adelaide stiffened. Sandra, where are the matches? Sandra backed away, her hands hidden. The children were mean to me, and Miss Flynn was. She said horrible things about Father. She lied. Tears welled up in her eyes. Show me your hands. Sandra backed up all the way to the bed. If you heard what they said about Father. Show me your hands, Adelaide snapped. Sandra refused. Adelaide grabbed her arm and had to wrestle her hand open, revealing the black smudges of soot on her fingers. Without relenting, Adelaide dug into Sandra's pocket and found the nearly empty matchbox. Anger, fear, and shock rang in Adelaide's head like the morning bells of a church service. You did this. You set fire to your own school. They lied, Sandra said, growling through her tears, her anger boiling up to match her mother's. Adelaide tensed. It doesn't matter, you don't. They said Father isn't coming back. He isn't. The silence hung over them like a blanket. Sandra sniffed, her face contorting with an assortment of emotions. Adelaide felt her fists balled up at her sides. He is gone, Sandra. We have mourned him for months. You mourned him as no one else could. I prayed that you would find some kind of closure, but instead you have embraced this lunacy. It's real. It's a dream, Adelaide cried. A horrible dream and nothing more. It has filled you with false hope and now you're setting fires. He's coming home, Sandra screamed. He's promised! Promised what? Adelaide asked, digging the picture from her pocket. This. Look at this. Is this what you dreamed? People burning in the streets. Only the ones who deserve it. Her voice trailed into a laughing sob. Do you deserve it, Mama? In that instant, Adelaide did not see her daughter. This has to end. You're sick, Sandra. This has to end. No, Sandra shrieked. She tried to shove her mother aside, but Adelaide caught her. They grappled, and Sandra tore the matchbook from Adelaide's hand. With her thumb, she lit a match and held it to her own dress. I want to go with him. I want to go with Papa. Adelaide dashed the flame. She grabbed hold of Sandra and pulled her out of her room. Sandra tried to light another match, but Adelaide slapped her hand. Her daughter screamed a hysterical mess of wordless threats. She kicked, spat, and clawed with strength Adelaide did not expect. But Sandra could not resist her mother's iron grip. Adelaide hauled her daughter up the stairs to the attic door and opened it with her free hand. Inside was a windowless room, covered in cobwebs and darkness, with a bare floor and cloth-covered crates filled with William's belongings. No, Sandra pleaded, seemingly lucid. No, Mama, not the attic. Please, I can't see Papa in here. Please don't do it, Mama. Mama! Adelaide shut the door and locked it. She heard her daughter slump to the floor, begin to sob, and then scream until her throat was raw. The next morning, Adelaide went downstairs. Her daughter hadn't made a sound, but nothing would change Adelaide's mind. Her daughter's renewed happiness had been a lie, which hid a psychosis that couldn't be mended with time or hope. She was about to step out the door when she heard her daughter's voice carried through the house. In the dark blue sky you keep, and often through my curtains peep, for you never shut your eye till the sun is in the sky. Adelaide shuddered. She hoped to never hear that song again. She immediately headed toward work, planning as she noted the unease in the air. The strange light in the sky was as bright as ever. She felt a faint pulsing sensation coming from it, like a heart steadily beating faster and faster. She wanted to see it snuffed out in the filthy depths of the English Channel. Its presence had brought ruin to her life. She turned toward the ironworks, desperate to get out of its light. The factory was dark and empty. Only one or two loitered near the entrance, including Carter, who looked like he wasn't sleeping. Carter, are you all right? Adelaide asked. He rubbed his face. Can't sleep. That light comes right through my window. Where is everyone? No idea. The whole neighborhood's been on edge. Some are leaving, running, out of the city. Don't know where. Don't know how far they'd have to be to get away from that. Adelaide frowned. I hate to ask, but do you still have that wagon? Carter looked at her. Yes, of course. How do you think I got to work? He saw the desperation in Adelaide's eyes. But I'm afraid I'm not going nowhere. I don't need it to get out of the city, Carter. I need to get my Sandra to a doctor. She's addled, Adelaide sighed. And I'm scared to death. He looked around and then back to her. Best to go now, I think. No point in working if no one's going to know you're working. Even Morgan's not here. Heard he was at the market yesterday when the fighting broke out. He was there. Just what I heard. Apparently there's been a lot of fighting, as well as the running, and hiding, and just fear. People are scared of that light. I hate it, Adelaide said, turning her back to it. Please, yes, let's go. Carter nodded. Hate to see you here like this, but let's make this quick. I'd like to get back to my wife and son. Adelaide didn't argue. They set their tools away and left the ironworks. It's bright, Carter said, shielding his eyes, like a second sun, My God in heaven. Adelaide frowned. The light was a piercing blue eye in the sky, visible even with the ochre of dusk setting behind it. I never put much stock in magicians, but I hope they put out that light soon. Too right, Carter said. The surroundings pulsed. A shift in pressure so heavy it made Adelaide's ears pop. The air went hot and silent as the sliver of light erupted into a blazing pillar of fire in the shape of a man. She felt her heart stop. The dark skies around the burning figure shimmered and crackled, as if the sky was made of shattered glass. A distant, terrible roar filled the air. The ground rumbled so violently that Adelaide was knocked off her feet. Buildings shook and the road split. Adelaide realized the roaring sound was water. Hundreds of tons of water spread and tore through the streets, smashing through buildings and tossing aside bodies like leaves. Oh no, Carter said, clutching his chest. My boy! My boy! He left the wagon and ran toward the roars. Adelaide screamed after him, but the sound was lost under the cacophony. A wave of water that carried hunks of debris smashed through a line of houses and fell upon Carter. His body vanished into the mass before he even realized it. Adelaide hurled herself away from the oncoming surge, putting the ironworks and wagon behind her, knowing she could never get away. The water smashed into the factory. In some miracle of causality, the water battered itself to a stop, which sent a gush of water spilling at her feet. She had time to note something, long and spiny, being dragged past her by the current. It was like no fish she had ever imagined, even in the darkest depths of the ocean. Chaos continued to erupt all around her. Buildings crumbled, others burned, and people screamed, some for help and others for a reckoning. She had to run. She had to get out of the city. She had to... Sandra, locked in an attic, unable to know what's happening. Mad or not, Adelaide couldn't leave her daughter to such a fate. She headed for home through the ankle-deep water. The cold bit at her flesh and stole the heat from her as she went, but she refused to slow down. Adelaide rounded a corner and slammed into a body that nearly knocked her back into the water. She let out a startled cry as two big hands grabbed her wrists before she fell. Adelaide found herself staring into the crazed, yellowed eyes of Mr. Tompkins, the butcher. His face was covered in hideous gashes that had peeled away his skin. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" he asked, with an unnaturally wide smile. Adelaide couldn't answer. She panicked as she tried to escape from his grip. "Do you hear it? He calls to us, all of us." Tompkins turned her to face the burning man. And as she did, a bolt of energy crackled around the figure. "Know the power of his light and rejoice. It is a new dawn, bright and beautiful." Tompkins' voice cracked as he spoke. His eyes bulged and his face swelled. "I can feel his warmth upon you," his voice croaked from somewhere deep in his chest. "Bright and beautiful." He pushed her aside and he stomped away on swollen, club-like feet as he sang a song to the figure in the sky. Adelaide massaged her wrists as she slowly backed away from him, and then ran when she thought he was far enough away. She didn't stop until she reached her home and slammed the door behind her. Her life over the past few months spiraled in her mind. Her husband departed in service to the king, proud and handsome in his military uniform. She received a few letters, and then nothing. Months passed without answers, ignored by those she thought would help. Then came the months of loneliness, an empty bed, and the necessities of life that demanded she put herself in the workforce to feed her broken family. Her daughter, longing for a father who seemed to have abandoned them, faded away before Adelaide's eyes. And now, all of this. She shook all over. The cold and despair conspired to savage her soul. She cried out, begging the madness all around her to stop. If it would not, then she begged for someone, anyone, to come and take her from this place. Outside, the destruction continued. She heard screaming, distant gunshots, and guttural sounds that were like no animal she'd ever imagined. The house shook, reverberating from some distant explosion. Then came the scratches and footfalls upon the roof. Water spread from under the basement door, followed by the sound of something splashing downstairs. Nothing could drag Adelaide out from this mental void. She imagined if some horror presented itself, if Tompkins came back with his cleaver, she would not be able to muster the strength. She had nothing left. Something smashed into the nearby window. Light blossomed through, red and angry, and Adelaide thought of the burning man. Her stomach wrenched with sudden revulsion. Then she smelled smoke seeping through the walls, and she heard a new sound, knocking. Adelaide thought it might be Constable Horn. How absurd would it be for a stiff-backed bobby to be doing a head count in the middle of Armageddon? She nearly laughed at the thought, annoyed at some distant part of her mind that whispered she was crazy. But the sound didn't come from behind her. It came from upstairs, the attic door. Had something gotten in? There was already a guest in the basement. It was rude of her not to invite them in, of course. Not that she had anything to offer but old meat and oatmeal. Maybe they'd like apples. She laughed again. More knocking. Not angry. Desperate. Pleading. Sandra. Adelaide blinked, finding herself. Sandra, she coughed. The air was thickening with smoke, filling the house as the fire began to eat away at the west wall. Sandra! The knocking loudened. Adelaide hurled her numb body forward and stumbled on feet that didn't seem to work anymore. She crawled on her hands and feet, dragging her wet dress along with her as she went upstairs. Her own room was ablaze. She spared only a moment to watch the flames eat away at her blanket, burning the empty place where her husband once slept. Like a mirage, the fire took the shape of a sleeping man before the smoke completely enveloped the room. The knocking continued from above. She hurried up the steps, coughing through smoke so thick that she couldn't see the walls around her. Sandra! She gripped the door, and searing pain shot through her hand. She yanked it back, the skin of her palm already blistered and peeling away. Sandra! The knocking ceased. Adelaide heard a voice from within, singing, As your bright and tiny spark lights the traveller in the dark. Adelaide clutched her wounded hand to her chest, imagined her daughter's smiling face. She clenched her teeth, draped her hands in layers of her wet dress, pushed the key into the lock, and turned the knob. Flames roared toward her as she flung the door open. The crates, loaded with her husband's clothes and mementos, the record of his life, burned like bonfires. The roof collapsed before she had gotten there, and where the wooden beams and shingles once were, was the hateful light of the burning man. Adelaide stared at the dancing shape amidst the flames. Sinuous, tall, and riddled with tentacles like some hideous amalgamation, what was left of her daughter slithered and swayed as it stared out toward the sky. The shape then turned and stalked toward her, and Adelaide fell to her knees in response. Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't remember why she was crying. Her eyes closed as her sanity was cast away like Carter in the flood. The hand, swollen and quivering as the blood shifted under the skin, reached forward to hold Adelaide's. She allowed herself to be lifted to her feet and guided downstairs, her fractured mind drawn to the distant sound of her daughter's voice as they walked through blood-stained waters and ash-choked skies towards the burning man and the end of the world. In the unfurling blackness, she saw William, her husband, with Sandra beside him, smiling, happy, bright and beautiful. Adelaide squeezed her daughter's hand as they sang together. Though I know not what you are, twinkle, twinkle, little star.
That's it for another episode of The Weird Chronicles. Join us next time for more tales of action and adventure.